Well, joining us now in studio to discuss the odds of facing both authorities, companies, stakeholders and society at large in the fight against cash and transit heists in the country are the following members of the panel. Rory Steyn, the co-founder of NSA Global Survey Security Consultants, joining us via Skype. In studio we have Mr. Tlasinyane Motaung, the spokesperson for the Motor Transport Workers Union. Also in studio, Tami Molefe from the Meza Partnerships and Community Liaison. And last but not least, the anti-crime activist, Mr. Yusuf Abramji. Good evening to you all and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Let me start with you, Mr. Yusuf Abramji. Just talk to us about what you think can be done to curb the scourge.
Well, I think it needs to be said that for us to point fingers only at the South African Police Service or only at the CIT companies will be absolutely wrong. A lot needs to be done. First of all, I'm happy to see some movement on the side of the police service, moving very rapidly, and we've seen a number of arrests being made, like the incident in Soweto today, and also some of the recent incidents where the robberies were foiled. This week alone, we had 7 attacks on cash vans. In 2 of the incidents, cash was stolen. The other ones were all luckily unsuccessful. So far this year, let's not forget, we had almost 170 attacks on cash vans, the figure includes cross-pavement robberies. I think we need all stakeholders. We need the government, namely the police. We need the cash in transit companies. We need the unions. We need the security companies. We need members of the public to come forward and to really say that we can all join hands. Everyone has a role to play. But I think very pivotal is the fact that cash in transit companies must also get their act together. I'm not sure whether we have minimum standards in place. I'm told we do. But I think that we need legislation to make sure that these cash vans are secured. And I had the opportunity of visiting a factory in Kyalami just the other day where they have technology in place. The CSIR, for example, developed the polyurethane technology to make sure that the money doesn't become accessible once the button has been pressed. We have, for example, ink or dye stain available for the cross-pavement robberies. And while some companies like SBV Security and others are using it, a number of other companies haven't even instituted these measures. So I think the security companies now must take ownership as well and make sure that we have the measures in place, because we have to stop this. This is organized crime at its worst. And these gangs are daring, they are brazen, and despite being arrested and despite some of them being shot and some of them are awaiting trial, they are still continuing, and these cash vans are vulnerable, and we need to act, and we need to act swiftly.
Well, Mr. Abramji, thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your thoughts with us. So just coming to studio now, let me start with you, Tlasinyane Motaung. Just talk to us about some of the concerns that the drivers actually have. Are they not scared going to work? Is the insurance on their life cover not increasing the premiums every month because their jobs are becoming increasingly more risky?
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, no, they're not increasing their insurance at the moment. But what is happening, like I normally say, it's like you're coming to a normal job. The only problem is when the robbery happens. You don't even have that in your mind that your job is dangerous. That's why I normally say this cash in transit job is not dangerous. The only dangerous are the people who are committing these robberies. So our members will just come like any ordinary member who's coming to work and coming to do their duties. So they're not having anything in their minds at that time until the robbery happened, yes.
And Mr. Molefe, having dealt with communities and trying to get the partnerships between communities as well as the police, do you find that members of the community are more likely to report a cash and transit heist when it happens, or will people just stop and take videos and walk away?
Yes, people do, we're seeing the trend now that people are starting to, make it as if it's a movie, making videos out of these. But we usually say that it would be best if, the community at large would perhaps even look at how, look at each other's, how they are living, how things are happening in their communities before these even happen. These are brothers and sisters that are doing this. So we are out there to come up and say something when we see something suspicious happening in our areas.
And just let me just bring you in there, Rory. Just talk to us about are these not inside jobs? I mean, a lot of people have said that perhaps some of the drivers themselves could be involved in informing some of the criminals as to what their routes are, how much money they're carrying. Where should the focus be in terms of trying to nip this in the bud?
Good evening, and thanks again for the opportunity. Thank you also to the guys that have already made comments. An excellent question. I don't think it's the drivers that would be complicit in these CIT heists, because they would be putting themselves in grave danger were that the case. But there's no question that information is leaking out somewhere. So your question to me was whether whether inside jobs play a role. Absolutely. So a vital element that we haven't discussed tonight is this whole issue of intelligence. Both from a crime intelligence perspective, why are we not infiltrating the syndicates that are perpetrating these and other crimes? And what about the, as your other guest has just pointed out, what about the CIT companies themselves? Where is their intelligence? Where is their vetting? What screening is conducted before people are employed? I think that the majority of the information that leaks out and becomes the inside job comes from inside the companies, where schedules are discussed and disclosed, and that sort of thing that is important to the criminals. You know, I often put myself in the position of that security officer who's got to wake up in the morning, strap on his body armor, pick up an automatic or an assault rifle, and head out in his vehicle, not knowing when it's going to happen. And it really has got to the point that it's not when, it's not if, it's when. Yusuf mentioned 170 thus far, and your introduction said 7 already this week. So we are keeping pace. We're probably ahead of 1 cash in transit robbery or attempt per day. So that's where I think our focus needs to be. It needs to be on the prevention and the intelligence. I think the courts, the criminal justice system has a role to play. I think we should be looking at far more serious penalties and sanctions for people convicted of this kind of crime. And in the main, been successful when they have arrested and charged these guys. So it's again, there's a big world, a big net out there that's involved in all of this. But I think that we need to concentrate very heavily on the intelligence and the prevention of the information getting out.
Well, of course, from the police side, the Police Minister Bigcele has mentioned that police should actually focus a bit more on these heists in order to actually curb them and reduce the rate at which they're actually spiking. Coming back to the workers themselves, do you think that it's a good idea to perhaps have professionals, some people with a military background, to be driving these vehicles, so that they know what to do when faced with guns?
Okay, thank you very much again. Those securities are professional themselves. As much as we also saying that they need more training, for us to say we need the people with military background, someone with military background, when he started also, he was like an ordinary man in the street. So he gets to be trained. And those guys who are transporting money, at the moment, with the experience that they're having, they can be better more than the military guys. The only thing that is needed is for these cash in transit companies to up their games. We have already complained about the issue of the firearms. And if you can look at the robbery that took place today, it is the 3rd robbery for the same schedule. So now that means the whole South Africa knows now that at this time, there is a vehicle that will leave Boksburg Cash Center going to, whether it's going to Kempton Park for banking, and is going to use this route. So obviously, the management itself, they are sleeping, because the very same vehicle, if you can look on the 17th of May, when it happens, it was 3 G4S vans following one another. If those people were well armed, those robbers were only 10. And coming to the guys who will be on 3 vans, really the issue of firearms will play a big role in helping to curb this violence that is happening there by the cash in transit.
So drivers need more firearms is what you're saying. Do you also need to have more drivers per vehicle as well?
We not more drivers, but more members on the crew. to say it's a driver and maybe 2 or 3 guys who are with the driver, so that just to have that manpower. Then it will also help. But let us not just put them there. We need to put them with the firearms that will match those AK-47s.
Because there is a lot of artillery that these people are actually using, and explosives as well. The ease with which these people are able to access explosives. Let's talk about that for a second.
That's from my side. I think we seem to be now going the side of now we are going to increase our armor. We're going to increase. We're now becoming an army that would. I think perhaps if we look closely at intelligence, like our guest has said, that it would help. Perhaps yes, we need some more escort towards this ICTs. We need intelligence is key. Some of these things can be stopped way before the time that they would happen. For us not to become an army that that transports cash. Yes, now and then, or there and there, we can be able to perhaps perhaps get better vehicles or so. But in the long run, it will end up becoming an army moving in the rest of our communities. So why not, look at it from a point of view of intelligence? Yeah,
I think it actually is a very good point. And I wish we could have the SAPS joining this conversation just to let us know from the intelligence side what they're actually planning on doing. Just, Rory, in closing, what else do you think can be done from the driver's side, from government side? You mentioned intelligence is something very important, but going forward, what should we do?
Okay, so your guest who spoke just before me is absolutely correct. We shouldn't, most of the measures that we've been speaking about, sadly, are reactive. We're talking about greater weapons, and there's a place for that. We're talking about further strengthening the vehicles, and there's a place for that. But we need to be more preventative minded. So one of the things, since you asked, is that I think we need to look at this whole issue of access to explosives. We know that we have this massive mining industry in South Africa, and it's pretty easy to get your hands on explosives simply by doing the common thing, and that's offering somebody a lot of money, either to look the other way or to get their hands on the explosives if they work at a mine. So there is very robust legislation in place. And there is such a person as the Chief Inspector of Explosives. But I think that you'll find, if you go and dig a little bit below the surface, that whole department is under-resourced. The facilities where the explosives are stored are not being regularly inspected. I'm speculating. And perhaps even not properly secured. So in addition to the intelligence as to who is doing this and how we prevent it, I also think we should have a look at the intelligence and the regulations and the sanctions around preventing people getting their hands on explosives and firearms. And you know what, if the criminals can procure the information, then so can the authorities, is my view. So I think we need to be a lot more preventative minded. And as Yusuf said, we all need to be pulling together. Everybody needs to be dragging this wagon in the same direction.
And so, Mr. Mutong, just in closing then, from the union's perspective, what will the union be doing in order to play their part to reduce these heists?
We will make that awareness as we have started with our march on the 12th of June. We will continue to do that. And also, I think the other thing that we will do, the other part that is worse is when you speak to management and they're not giving that enough ear to us as a trade union. I think it's because they're undermining us, I don't know. But when you talk to them, you're telling them that I see a loophole here. They're not going to react on that. This robbery of today, we have already informed the company. And even today, I wrote an email to the CEO of G4S, telling them about the loophole that is there. They're not acting. Then you ask yourself, why are these people not acting on something that, at least they must tell us that, okay, we have looked at what we have proposed. It is not the reason why these robberies are happening. But we're saying to them, there is this thing that is happening there. Look at it. They don't.
Another thing is that this money actually is insured, so the mentality is that, they're going to get their money back either way. Your closing comments?
My closing comments would be perhaps let's stop pointing fingers at each other. This is the time. This is a sketch that is in front of us. What we can do is that pull together. Let's work together as different stakeholders to perhaps just come up with different way of assisting our communities out there. I can want to believe that the rest of South Africa already is scared. It's so scared. So it's for us to come together. The police, the different security companies, all different stakeholders should come together and think of how we can be able to go forward with this. Together we can be able to perhaps make a difference.
Well, thank you very much to our esteemed panelists. As you've heard it for yourself, together we can achieve more. And if you do happen to witness a heist in action, please do call 10 111 as soon as possible.